The morning sun was bright over the bustling city, its golden rays reflecting off the glass towers that reached toward the sky. Amid the rush of commuters pouring into office buildings, cafes opening their doors, and traffic horns blaring, one man walked quietly, his head held high, his stride calm yet commanding. He was dressed in a simple black suit, his tie neatly fastened, his shoes polished but not flashy. At first glance, he looked like any other professional heading into the heart of the city's financial district. But his eyes, sharp and steady, held a certain depth, the kind of quiet strength forged through years of hard work, humiliation, and battles most people would never see. His name was Marcus Carter, a black man who had built his life from the ground up. Few knew his story, even fewer knew his true identity. On this particular morning, Marcus decided to visit a bank branch not far from his corporate headquarters. To outsiders, it might have seemed like a routine errand, depositing checks, asking about an investment account, or finalizing a loan for one of his many ventures. But to Marcus, this was not just any visit. He wanted to see firsthand how everyday customers were treated, particularly those who looked like him. It was something he often did secretly, blending into the crowd, because he knew the world still carried ugly biases hidden beneath smiles and scripted greetings. As he walked toward the double glass doors, he inhaled deeply, bracing himself, though he didn't yet know why. Some part of him sensed that today would be different. 2. Inside the bank, the air was cool, filled with the faint scent of disinfectant and the low hum of printers and counting machines. Several employees were busy with customers, their voices polite and measured, the rehearsed tone of people working in finance. Behind the main counter, a tall, middle-aged man with neatly parted blonde hair and a sharp suit stood with his arms folded. His nameplate read Mr. Whitmore, branch manager. His eyes scanned the room like a hawk, but instead of exuding warmth or leadership, his gaze carried judgment. When Marcus entered, Mr. Whitmore's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, his jaw tightened, and his lips pressed into a thin line. He didn't see Marcus as a potential client, a professional, or even just another man. He saw only his skin color, and in his narrow mind, that meant trouble or inferiority. Marcus approached the counter with calmness, pulling a set of neatly organized documents from a slim leather folder. He smiled at the young teller and explained that he wanted to inquire about opening a business account under his company's name. Before the teller could respond, Mr. Whitmore swooped in, placing a firm hand on the counter and interjecting with a tone dripping with authority. "Sir, are you sure you're in the right place?" he asked, his eyes narrowing. Marcus raised an eyebrow, not out of surprise but out of recognition. He had seen this before, countless times. He replied evenly, "Yes, I'm quite sure. I'd like to speak to someone about a corporate account." The room grew slightly tense, though most customers pretended not to notice. The young teller looked caught between her training and her manager's presence. Mr. Whitmore leaned closer, his voice lower but edged with disdain. "Corporate account? This bank doesn't just hand those out to anybody who walks in off the street." Marcus's smile didn't falter, but inside, his patience was already being tested. 3. The exchange drew the attention of others in the bank. A woman waiting in line shifted uncomfortably, glancing between Marcus and the manager, sensing something was wrong. A man seated in the waiting area frowned, recognizing the tone but staying silent, as so many do in the face of injustice. Marcus remained calm, though his heart beat steadily, every thought a reminder of the restraint he had perfected over the years. He slid the documents across the counter, neatly signed forms and proof of incorporation, but Whitmore didn't even glance at them. Instead, he pushed them back with a flick of his fingers, as though dismissing not only the papers but the man standing before him. "We don't have time for this nonsense," he muttered. "People come in here all the time pretending to be something they're not. I don't know what game you're trying to play, but you're not fooling me." His voice grew louder now, enough for others to hear. Marcus inhaled slowly, his jaw tightening, but still, he didn't lash out. He looked Whitmore in the eye and said softly, "I assure you, there's no game. I'm here to do legitimate business." That's when it happened, the moment that froze the entire room. Whitmore's hand shot out, striking Marcus across the face with a sharp slap that echoed through the quiet bank lobby. Gasps erupted from nearby customers, the young teller recoiled in horror, and silence fell for a split second as everyone tried to process what they had just witnessed. Marcus didn't move. He stood there, his cheek stinging, his dignity intact, his eyes still locked on the man who had dared to cross the line from prejudice into violence. 4. Time seemed to slow after the slap, the sound of it still lingering in the air. The young teller stammered, Mr. Whitmore, her voice trembling. The other employees froze, unsure whether to intervene or stay silent, bound by fear of their boss. A customer in the corner finally found his voice and shouted, "You can't do that." His outrage sparked murmurs among the others, a wave of disbelief rippling through the lobby. Yet Whitmore, emboldened by years of unchecked arrogance, straightened his suit jacket and sneered. "Men like him need to know their place," he muttered, though the venom in his words carried loud enough for several to hear. Marcus's hand twitched at his side, but he kept it steady. He could have retaliated, could have raised his voice, could have demanded immediate justice. But Marcus Carter was not just any man. He carried a weight of responsibility far beyond this moment, and he knew something that Whitmore didn't: power often speaks loudest in silence. He leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but piercing as he asked, "Do you always treat potential clients this way?" His tone was so measured, so devoid of the anger anyone else might have unleashed, that it unsettled the manager more than shouting ever could. The room was no longer on Whitmore's side. His arrogance, once intimidating, now looked pitiful in the face of Marcus's unshaken composure. 5. Behind the silence that followed, Marcus's mind was racing, not with fear, but with deliberation. He thought of his employees, thousands across the country who relied on him, families who depended on the company he had built from nothing but grit and vision. He thought of the nights he had worked while others slept, the deals he had closed, the sacrifices he had made to reach this level. And now, standing in a small branch bank, he was being treated as though he were worthless. The irony would have been laughable if it weren't so painful. He decided then that this moment was not just about him, it was about every person who had ever been looked down on because of the color of their skin, every professional dismissed before being heard, every dream crushed by arrogance and hate. Slowly, he reached for his folder again and pulled out a single document, one bearing a bold corporate letterhead with his full name and title, Marcus D. Carter, Chief Executive Officer of Carter Global Holdings. He placed it gently on the counter, sliding it toward Whitmore. The manager glanced at it carelessly, then did a double take, his smugness faltering. His eyes scanned the paper again, disbelief flashing across his face. The customers nearby leaned in, curious. Marcus didn't speak yet. He simply watched as the realization began to dawn on Whitmore, that the man he had just humiliated and assaulted wasn't a struggling nobody but the CEO of a multinational company whose accounts dwarfed the branch's entire portfolio. And in that dawning realization, Whitmore's world began to crack. The silence in the bank grew heavier with each passing second as Whitmore's eyes lingered on the letterhead. His lips moved faintly, as though he were trying to form words but found none. The realization hit him slowly, then all at once, like the ground beneath his feet had shifted and left him dangling over a chasm. His face drained of color, the confidence and arrogance he wore like armor crumbling under the weight of truth. The other employees exchanged nervous glances, whispering among themselves, while the customers in line leaned forward, eager to see how this scene would unfold. For the first time since Marcus entered, Whitmore's voice trembled when he spoke. This has to be some kind of mistake," he stammered, fumbling with the paper as though hoping to find an error that would restore his authority. But there was no mistake. The name was clear, the signature authentic, the company stamp undeniable. Marcus stood in silence, his expression calm, almost serene, but his eyes, those piercing, unflinching eyes, held Whitmore captive. It was a stare that spoke of years of being underestimated, of battles fought in silence, of dignity guarded like treasure. Finally, Marcus broke the silence, his voice steady but edged with steel. "I came here today to open a corporate account. Instead, I was treated like a criminal, slapped in the face, and told to know my place. Tell me, Mr. Whitmore, do you treat all your potential clients this way, or just the ones who look like me?" His words sliced through the room like a blade, and though they were spoken quietly, they carried more power than any shout could have. A few customers nodded subtly, their expressions affirming the truth everyone had witnessed. Whitmore swallowed hard, his arrogance dissolving into panic. 2. The young teller, still pale from shock, shifted uncomfortably as she glanced at Marcus's documents. She had been the first to hear his calm request for a business account, and now she realized she had almost been complicit in letting her manager's cruelty pass without resistance. The weight of guilt pressed against her chest. Another employee, a middle-aged woman from the loan department, stepped forward timidly, her voice hushed but firm. "Mr. Carter, if I may," she said, her eyes meeting his respectfully. "We would be honored to assist you with any account needs." It was a simple statement, but it drew a sharp glare from Whitmore, who was desperately trying to maintain control of the situation slipping through his fingers. Marcus turned toward her, his expression softening slightly. "Thank you," he replied. His words, though few, carried an unmistakable authority, the kind that comes not from loudness but from truth and presence. Whitmore, realizing his grip was gone, lunged forward and snatched the paper from the counter, waving it wildly as if trying to regain dominance. "Even if this is real, you can't just walk in here expecting special treatment," he blurted out, his voice cracking under the strain of fear. But the irony was lost on him. Marcus hadn't asked for special treatment, only respect. The customers began murmuring again, louder now, their disapproval of the manager's behavior impossible to contain. A man in the back, dressed in a mechanic's uniform, shouted, "You laid hands on him before you even looked at the paper. Don't try to twist it now." The truth cut through the room, leaving Whitmore exposed. He suddenly realized his own employees and customers were no longer silent witnesses, they were his judges. 3. Marcus let the murmurs grow for a moment before speaking again, his voice deliberate, resonant, and calm. "I didn't come here today expecting to reveal who I am," he said, addressing the room now, not just Whitmore. "I came here to see if this institution lived up to the values it claims to hold, values of service, respect, equality. What I experienced instead was humiliation and violence. This is not about me alone. It's about the people who walk in here every day, people who don't have the power or the resources I do to defend themselves. How many others have been treated this way, silently, with no one to witness or believe them?" His words settled like thunder across the lobby, stirring the conscience of everyone present. Some nodded solemnly, others lowered their eyes, ashamed of the truth he had spoken aloud. Whitmore's chest rose and fell rapidly, his mind racing with excuses, but every justification sounded hollow even to him. He was trapped, not by Marcus's position as CEO, but by his own actions, witnessed by too many to deny. In desperation, Whitmore straightened his jacket and muttered, "You people always," he stopped himself too late. The phrase slipped like poison into the air, revealing the rot at his core. The gasp that followed was collective, sharp, unforgiving. Even his employees recoiled, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. Marcus's lips pressed into a thin line, his patience tested beyond measure, but still he did not erupt. Instead, he let Whitmore's words hang in the air like smoke, exposing him more thoroughly than any rebuttal could. The silence that followed was no longer protective, it was condemning. 4. At that moment, the glass doors swung open, and 2 security guards stepped inside, alerted by the raised voices. They looked around, confusion written on their faces as they tried to piece together the scene. Before Whitmore could twist the story in his favor, several customers spoke at once. "He slapped that man. The manager assaulted him. We all saw it." Their voices clashed, but their message was unified, undeniable. The guards hesitated, turning to Marcus as if seeking guidance. Marcus lifted his hand slightly, a simple gesture that calmed the chaos. "I don't need an escort," he said firmly. "But I expect accountability." His composure struck the guards like a command, and they stepped back, unsure whether to intervene further. Whitmore, now sweating, turned to them in desperation. "You don't understand. He's exaggerating, he provoked me." His words stumbled, unraveling under the weight of truth. Marcus reached into his folder again and produced another document, this one heavier, embossed with the seal of his company and a signature that carried legal weight. He placed it on the counter beside the first, this time for everyone to see. "This branch," he said slowly, each word deliberate, "is under review for handling our corporate accounts. Today's events will determine whether Carter Global Holdings invests here, or removes millions of dollars from this institution permanently." The declaration hit like an earthquake. Gasps filled the lobby, and the employees froze, their futures suddenly bound to the outcome of this moment. Whitmore's knees seemed to buckle slightly, his arrogance collapsing under the realization of what he had jeopardized with one act of hatred. 5. The bank lobby had transformed into a courtroom without walls, its jury made up of everyday people who had seen the truth unfold with their own eyes. Marcus stood as both witness and prosecutor, his calm presence more powerful than any outburst. Whitmore, once the unquestioned authority in the branch, now looked like a man standing on trial, stripped of the false power he had wielded for so long. The employees avoided his gaze, their loyalty fractured beyond repair. Even the young teller who had once looked to him for guidance now looked at Marcus with respect, her eyes silently pleading for him to see her as separate from the rot her manager represented. Marcus glanced around the room, measuring the weight of what had transpired, then turned his gaze back to Whitmore. "This is more than just about money," he said quietly, yet his voice carried to every corner of the lobby. "It's about dignity, it's about justice, and it's about making sure no one else who looks like me has to walk into a place of business and be treated like less than human." His words resonated with a force that could not be denied. Whitmore's mouth opened as if to speak, but nothing came out. His excuses had run dry, his power stripped, his mask torn away. The once proud manager now looked small, insignificant, crushed beneath the weight of his own prejudice. Marcus reached for his folder, gathering his documents with deliberate care, his movements dignified, as though to remind everyone watching that his power was not in shouting or violence, but in restraint, in truth, in the quiet authority of a man who knew exactly who he was. As he turned to leave, the lobby remained hushed, every person inside aware that they had just witnessed something greater than a confrontation. They had witnessed justice, unfinished but undeniable, taking its first steps.